course, that was a very important part, wasn't it, the racing and the rallying, because it gave the company very good publicity.
Yes, for the record breaker, we actually polished 6 engines, which were chosen from 12 engines, and then the engines for the actual record attempt. There were 2 main engines that were the best of those 6 that went with them, and they were polished inside and out. All the conrods were polished, and so anything would show up if it wasn't right.
Yes.
And that took a bit of time.
Can you imagine? Yes.
All by hand. You didn't have your die grinders like today.
Yes.
It was all right. Good work.
Yes.
Yeah. It wasn't that there was anything we couldn't do, as it were. And at the end of racing, in the early days when I was first there, Donald Healey would sit us all down at the rear of the showroom with the big screen up there, and show us his 16mm films of that. And we used to have that. I had that about 4 or 5 occasions.
Yes.
I said I'd like a job in the BMC competitions department.
Wow.
Thinking to myself, I've got about more chance of being struck by lightning, you see. So I think about 2 weeks later I got a letter from the MG Car Company offering me a job as assistant to Marcus Chambers in the competitions department. So I suppose most of the events we entered with the cars, saloon cars anyway, would have been Group 2 cars.
Yes.
And then the GT cars, of course, when we're particularly talking about Austin Healeys, then they came into the Group 3 category. Obviously, the Healey was one of the prominent cars. The Austin Healey 3000 was the prominent car in the rally program.
Okay.
So there were about a dozen mechanics in the workshop,
Yeah.
and foreman, the chief mechanic, and 2 under foremen. And the chief mechanic would allocate the job sheet to a particular mechanic, and he would build the whole car, and that would be the engine and everything. Once it come off the production line, of course, with MGs and Austin Healeys, they were just over there,
of
you know,
course,
so they drive them around the corner into the shop and you start stripping it down. You know, talking about Austin Healeys, one of the first trips I did was when I drove a Works Healey. I had the awful job of driving a Works rally car to Dusseldorf to meet up with one of the crews who was coming up from Switzerland. The reason for that was that Peter Riley and Tony Ambrose had been doing a reconnaissance of the Alpine Rally down in the south of France.
So you were driving this well-tuned rally car.
Oh, it's a full works.
From Abingdon to Dusseldorf.
Yeah.
And were you by yourself, or did you have?
Oh yes, no. Oh no, you.
So that must have been an incredible experience then. Did you enjoy it? Did you
Oh yes,
put your foot down and yeah.
I mean, I've always loved driving. You
Yes,
know,
yes.
it's just absolute magic, really.
I can imagine.
And then I had another trip, just mentioning Healeys again, and Pat Moss. Pat Moss won the 1960 Liège rally.
Yeah,
right.
famous.
An incredible result that was. He was such a lovely person and a brilliant driver. And she bought the car from the factory when we'd finished with it. And she said to Doug Watts, the chief mechanic, "Can you make sure you put some bumpers on it before I get it down at Tring, because I don't want it backed into when I'm down shopping in Tring."
So you use this highly tuned rally car to do shopping in?
Well, it was just pretty well as it was, you know.
Yes.
It was the same spec car. We hadn't detuned it or put two carburetors on it or anything. So
incredible.
working conditions in Le Mans pits, yes, very different. I mean, the danger that they don't allow now with health and safety, in so much as you'd be working in the pits, you'd be working on a car, and you'd be quite easy to find a car going within inches of you doing 100 miles an hour. There was no barrier between pit lane and and where the mechanics were working. So if you happened to turn around at the wrong time or put your hand down, then it was curtains, literally. I refueled the SR car. In fact, there was one time which I was concerned about. In those days, the refueling systems were gravity fed. You'd have a great big funnel that the fuel would be poured into. You then had an alligator clipper you clip onto the car to stop any static causing sparks there, and then you'd literally just pour the fuel into the fuel tank on a gravity basis. This very often resulted in airlocks, which obviously blew back, and sometimes you find yourself covered in fuel, etc. Again, it couldn't happen today, and this did happen when I was fueling the SR. I had a blowback. I managed to get the fuel in there, put the cap down, sealed the cap. The car went out, never came back. So I had a few apprehensive moments, thinking, obviously I haven't put enough fuel in. It's round the other side of the track, and I'm not going to be the most popular mechanic in the pits. As luck would have it, it wasn't anything to do with the fuel. I did put enough fuel in there. The clutch had failed after about 4 hours. And I was lucky enough to be there in 1968 when they still had what I sort of call a proper Le Mans start, when the drivers stand across the track. They then run over and jump into the car, put the seatbelt on and start it, and they're away. I at 20 had the job of sitting on the starting grid with the big GT SR car, warming it up. To, you imagine a 20-year-old sitting in there with all this going on, all the crowd there, all the noise, all the cameras, and you're sitting there as a 20-year-old just revving the throttle. Brilliant.
But 69. I went to the practice weekend.
Okay, good.
And we were there for hours.
Right.
And it ran perfectly all right.
Right.
And it didn't have any problems.
Brilliant.
And then we went out for the race in 69, Clive and I. And unfortunately, John Wolf got killed on the first lap in his 917 Porsche.
Yeah.
And anyway, whatever went on then, there was an overheating problem. And that was it. And that's really how I got to drive for the works, was because I did the testing on the original SR before anybody else did.
And so was that more or less the end of the Healey racing team?
1970. And but the car went the next year, 70. They took the top off the car and turned it into the XR37.
Ah, okay.
After a week of practice sessions at the circuit, we had to take the car back, the race car, for scrutineering, and I vividly recall that one of the tests was the vehicle was taken over, had to be pushed over a height block to determine that it got the ground clearance to allow it to race at Le Mans. And what we were told by Jeff Healey before we started manoeuvring the car was not just to push but lift as well. And while we were pushing it, we actually got our hands under the wheel arches, lifting it so that it just grazed over the top of this particular block, which would have, if we failed, it wouldn't have qualified for scrutiny.